Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Abby and today we'll be talking about the knitting plans that I have for Q4 and into 2024, just this upcoming fall and winter season. I've got a few things on my needles at the moment that I do want to show you at some point, so I'll probably do like a whip update video and just kind of take you through that. But in the meantime, I have been planning a lot of projects, so I'm just going to take you through each of those. For some of the projects, I haven't fully fleshed out what I want to do yet, but I have some ideas, so I'll talk about that. And that's going to be about it. A somewhat interesting thing has happened to me recently. So I've talked on the internet a couple times before about how I like to have a pretty small yarn stash, and kind of for two reasons. One was in part like more of a budget related thing, like I haven't always had a ton of extra money to spend on yarn, so I didn't want to just like buy a bunch of yarn that I wasn't immediately going to be using. And then the second reason is really just because having a big stash of yarn that I don't know what to do with, or maybe I have some loose plans with, kind of stresses me out. So I just prefer to like keep it fairly contained and just have like a few projects worth of yarn so that I can kind of keep the momentum going with my knitting. But recently, within this last like year, I would say, or in the last like 6 months, so in 2023, I have done a little bit of traveling and visited some yarn stores and just done some more like in-person shopping that I haven't done in quite a while. And due to that, mostly, I've kind of just been acquiring yarn and kind of each time I go into a store, I'll like buy one or two skeins, that sort of thing, as like a souvenir, or just because I want to support the store or whatever. And I just like don't typically buy yarn like that. Usually what I do is I am on Ravelry and sometimes Instagram, and I'm looking at different patterns that are coming out, and I'm just doing like sometimes hours worth of research into patterns. That's like what I like to plan around, and that's like what really excites me about knitting. Anyway, long-winded way to say that I've kind of ended up with a bit of a yarn stash, and it's like low-key starting to stress me out a little bit. Like I need to make sure that I've got a plan in place for some of these. Some of them are sweater quantities, but I've kind of ended up in this place with like a bunch of like smaller quantities that I have had to figure out what to do with. So that's what we'll be talking about. I think with all of these projects, I have started with the yarn and then found a pattern to match, rather than the other way around, except for maybe one. So anyway, let's go ahead and get into it. So I'll actually start with the project that I bought this yarn with this pattern in mind. So what happened was Brooklyn Tweed had a sale. I think it was like a clearing out sale of some sort. They had a bunch of shelter on a pretty steep discount, and they only had like maybe 4 or 5 colors. In the past few years, I've knit several of Emily Greene's accessory patterns. Like I knit 2 different pairs of fingerless gloves, I knit a hat, and I really love her patterns. I think she's a great pattern writer and then just designer in general. And I've kind of had in the back of my head for a while that I wanted to make one of her sweaters. She's kind of known for having like detailed and advanced patterns, and so I've like been thinking about this project as like its own project that's going to take up like a certain amount of time, rather than just something that like I might kind of spontaneously decide to cast on, because they are pretty involved. So the pattern that I'm talking about that I have in mind is called Pitch. It's published by Brooklyn Tweed, so it's got a lot of the elements that you would kind of expect from Brooklyn Tweed. So it's knit bottom up, it's worked flat and seamed, it has patch pockets, and then it also has a bunch of these pretty sophisticated cables kind of on a bed of moss stitch. And I think the most like striking thing about it is on the back, it's got these 2 big cables that kind of pitch away from each other, hence the name. to reveal sort of this like ribbed back, like upper back. It's one of those rare occasions where I'm actually knitting with the yarn that the pattern calls for. So I have got a large sweater quantity, this is not all the yarn that I have, of Shelter. The colorway is Snowbound, and it's a very light gray with like darker and mid-toned gray speckles throughout, but it's pretty subtle. The sample is knit in a different colorway. It looks like a bit of a darker gray, but it is also tweed like this one. And in the description of the pattern, they call it a coat, which does seem pretty fitting. It's quite oversized. It looks like it's going to be pretty heavy, even in the woolen spun yarn. It just kind of looks like a coat, or like a house, maybe like a house coat. But I think my plan is to make it a little bit smaller than they recommend. Yeah, their sample is shown with 13.5 inches of ease, which I've never knit a sweater with that much ease before. So that does like scare me a little bit. I think what I'll end up doing is making this cardigan, I'm calling it a coatigan because it is like right in between a cardigan and a coat. So for my coatigan, I think I'll probably have maybe like 6 inches of positive ease. I'm a little scared to go down to like 4 or something where I would kind of normally make a sweater. Yeah, just because it is like, it needs to be oversized, but the 13.5 inches definitely freaks me out a little bit, so I probably won't do that. But yeah, maybe like 6 to 8 inches of positive ease is kind of where I'll end up. So I haven't swatched for it yet, but I'm really excited to. Another thing to note is the skill level is at advanced 5 out of 5. So I'm excited to challenge myself and get started on this. I'm sure it's going to be a big undertaking. The next sweater I have planned is a hoodie. I've never knit a hoodie before, but I wear them all the time in the winter. And I've kind of been going back and forth between 3 different patterns. So the first is the Downtown Hoodie by Tori. The second is the No Sweat Shirt by Park Williams, and third is the R&R Hoodie by Tanis Lavallee. I probably won't make Tanis's version because I don't think I want to do a zipper right now, but I wanted to kind of compare it with the others and consider it because I do really like the zipper. And I've never put in a zipper into a knitted garment, and I think that's something that like I just want to do at some point in my life. But I'm leaning more towards the other two, something a little bit simpler to knit in the round, a little bit more mindless. The yarn I have for this is Valley Yarn's Worthington, which I bought for a different sweater that didn't end up working out. And this is kind of Valley Yarn's version of Rowan felted tweed, at least like that's my opinion. So what I did was actually bought like the main color in the Valley Yarns version, and then I bought 2 other accent colors in Rowan felted tweed. So I mean, they do like go together really well, like they're basically the same yarn. So this main color is this lighter gray with some like yellow and beige tweed in it. And then the other 2 accent colors, which I plan on striping, pretty similar to the Downtown Hoodie. I've got this sort of like deep emerald green and this light, brighter lavender. And these are both tweed because they're Rowan felted tweed. So I've actually already swatched for this sweater, and I think I have a pretty good idea of what I'm going to do. So we've got 2 stripes of each color, and in between the green and the lavender, I did 2 stripes of the gray. And I really like how this looks on the purl side. So I think I may end up knitting the Park Williams hoodie because hers is specifically designed to be like the purl side is the right side. I love reverse stockinette, but I especially love like stripes and fades in reverse stockinette. So I think this is what I'll end up doing. I like the subtlety of the lavender with the gray. Like, it stands out, but it doesn't stand out as much as the green. So I like that it kind of has that subtle effect with the stripes. And I'm just like been a really big fan of green and lavender. All right, moving on. I found myself at a yarn store a few months ago, and they had Cascade Yarns Eco Plus Merino. I have never actually used this yarn before, but I am quite amused by the gigantic skein. So I only needed 2, but one of the things that this yarn store did was they actually had, like, for each color of this yarn that they sold, they had split this giant skein into 2 cakes and kind of sold them individually. So I liked that because you could buy the amount that you actually need for your sweater and not have to buy, like, these are each almost 500 yards. So if you were like, let's say 100 yards under, you wouldn't have to buy like the entire 500 yard skein. You could buy the half skein and make that a little bit easier. Anyway, it ended up working out that I needed 2 skeins. This is a bulky weight yarn, which I don't work with very often. It kind of hurts my hands, and I'm not a huge fan of like wearing chunky sweaters. But I had come across this pattern a few months before I purchased this yarn called Bonebone by Miyuki Watanabe. Sorry if that's a terrible pronunciation. And I just really liked it. It's kind of been in the back of my head as a bulky sweater that I might actually enjoy making and wearing. So when I saw the Eco Plus yarn, which I've kind of always wanted to try out just for fun, I decided this would be probably the perfect use of it. So this will probably be something that I make closer to the fall and winter when it starts to get cooler, just given the bulkiness of it. But I think going off the color alone, I will probably get a lot of wear out of it. Kind of a similar story for this next one. I was in a yarn store and came across this Fibra Natura Cobblestone yarn, which is a little bit like a spin cycle dyed in the wool yarn. Each of these are over 600 yards, so I just got one, and I figured I could find a yarn to pair this with and make one of the many Colorwork sweaters that use this type of color changing yarn. So it's been in my stash for a few weeks, and at first I thought I was going to make the Stonecrop by Andrea Mowry. Most likely the pullover is what I had in mind. Another sweater that has kind of similar vibes to the Stonecrop is the Laurel jumper. And so I've also had this one in my favorites for a long time, and I've kind of thought about making it, but I decided to do a little bit more research. And as I was looking into other sweaters that this yarn would work with, I came across the Geometer sweater by Lotta Löthgren. This sweater has got similar vibes to Alpenglow, but if you look closely at the two, you start to notice quite a few differences between the two designs. So I just wanted to point that out. But I've kind of settled on making this sweater. I haven't fully made up my mind. This colorway is kind of sick, and I think it would look nice with like a kind of cooler toned gray maybe. So I'll have to do some hunting to find a yarn that would go well with this. But this is such a good colorway. When I was in Portland a few months ago, I went to the Starlight Knitting Society store, which is such an awesome yarn store. They've got an amazing selection, and she was also telling me that you can buy from them online, so I need to check that out. But while I was there, I came across this Kelbourne Woolens cricket yarn, which I hadn't really heard about before I saw it there, and it's got a really interesting like thick and thin hand spun kind of vibe. And it's funny, I've been picking up a lot of like hand spun-ish yarns recently, and I've also been spinning a lot of yarn recently. I guess that is just what I'm into lately, but I really loved these two colors together. This rusty sort of brown, like warmer toned. I mean, honestly, it's got a lot of different colors in it. I guess like the main color is a sort of browny red, but then it's got like a brighter red and a yellow and like a kind of cooler white. Also some like darker browns to maybe black. All spun into a very tightly spun single ply. And so this color caught my eye, and I was looking for colors to pair it with, and of course I chose green. It's like one of my go-tos. But I purchased these two skeins and I thought maybe I'll buy more yarn to go with it to make a sweater. But I think I'm actually going to kind of pivot a little bit from all of my sweater knitting and knit a shawl. I haven't knit a shawl in a long time, and I have kind of stopped wearing them as much, but something about this yarn like makes me want to knit a shawl. So I was doing some pattern research. I came across this shawl and I thought it would be perfect for the two skeins that I bought. I am a huge sucker for garter stitch. It looks really simple, which I think is something that I like need in a shawl in order to wear it more often. And it's probably going to be perfect for like Zoom meetings. And I really like the stripes and the slip stitch columns. So yeah, I think, and it also takes like the exact amount of yarn that I have for each skein, which is a little bit of a rare find. So again, not set in stone for this yarn, but if I do decide to knit a shawl with this yarn, it'll probably be this one. Another local yarn store pickup. I was shopping with my partner and he found this yarn and he was really drawn to the colors and the kind of characteristic of the yarn itself. But I think the plan with this yarn is to make a pair of socks. So I've got this single skein of the lighter gray with that like darker nylon thread running through it, and then the sort of olive green. And so I'll probably end up doing, I think we talked about like some stripes in the cuff, and it doesn't say what weight of yarn it is, but I think it's probably about a DK weight. So these will be some like thicker socks for him. During that Brooklyn Tweed sale, I could not help myself and I bought 2 extra skeins of shelter in the cast iron colorway, planning to make a hat for myself. I think I've narrowed it down to 2 Jared Flood patterns, either Forge or Ardenwald. Still deciding on that, but I've been wanting a black cabled hat for a while now, so it'll probably be one of the 2. And the last project that I have planned, semi-planned, is using this mystery cotton that my partner bought to make something that he never ended up making, and neither of us can remember what this yarn is. It definitely had cotton in it, or maybe like cotton was the primary fiber. I'm not sure. If I really had to guess, I think it's like an 80% cotton, 20% merino, or something in that ballpark. So it's just been sitting in my stash for years, and I've never like really known what to do with such a small amount of yarn, and I don't have like any other yarn in my stash with a similar fiber content to pair it with. So it's just been sitting here. And then I came across a few weeks ago this pattern called an Italian summer scarf, and this scarf has got a bit of Sophie scarf vibes, the petite knit pattern that like blew up a few months ago, but I find it a little bit more interesting. It's also free, so that's nice. It's really simple, but I liked the eyelet detail kind of mixed in with the garter stitch. And so I thought that even though I'm not like the biggest like small scarf person, they are becoming a little bit more trendy, and I like the idea of being able to kind of elevate an outfit. Elevate a t-shirt is probably what I would do, by wearing just like a fairly small scarf. I know that I've seen some that are like really small, and I would probably, this pattern has several sizes, and I'd probably end up making whatever of the larger sizes that I can with the amount of yarn that I have. But yeah, I liked the idea of it. So we'll see if it actually pans out and if I would actually wear something like it. But I do think this like cotton merino question mark blend would kind of be perfect for this type of accessory, because it's not necessarily something I want to like bundle up in and keep me super warm, but at the same time it would offer, you know, some warmth as well as style. All right, I could keep going forever. I literally have a Google Doc opened with like pages of patterns that I want to make, but I think I'm gonna cut it off there, and that's at least like a good, that's honestly probably like a year's worth of knitting for me. So we'll see if I get to everything, and you know, we'll see what sticks. But at least that's what I have planned, and that's kind of what's keeping me like motivated to finish up some projects so I can get some other ones cast on. So that's it for me, and I'll see you next time.